So over the past probably week or so, I've really been trying to take a deep dive and reflect as to how I was able to create the success that I have with my content agency, but more importantly, how I can reverse engineer the process so that I can keep what worked, delete what didn't, and duplicate my success as much as possible for as many other creators as possible. And one of the main determining factors I realized was so crucial for my success and other creators that I know as well is showing up despite the circumstance. So one of the most common things that deter creators from succeeding, myself included for over 2 years, is the fact that I gave my power to succeed to external sources that I couldn't control. So I know for me personally, I said that, companies wouldn't hire me because I didn't have enough followers, or I don't think companies are going to hire me because there's 10,000 other creators that are equally talented, if not more talented than me. And it comes down to this core question of what do you think a company is thinking about you when you do a DM, when you do a sales call, when you reach out in any capacity. And I realized for myself that I thought that the brand thought I was a no-name, that I was a wannabe, that I was somebody who wasn't as good as the rest of the pack, that they wouldn't want to afford me, that I couldn't charge what I was asking for because I wasn't worth it. I personally thought that that's what brands thought about me. And guess what? That's exactly what the brands thought about me, because that's how I showed up. Because what you say in your DMs, your outreach, your sales calls, whatever it is far less important than how it's said. Because people have this innate BS filter that they can read right through what you say and they know if you actually believe what you're saying or not. And what I realized about myself is that I personally don't believe that I am the guy to succeed, and therefore I am not going to. So what I began to realize is this thought process that I just described is not just my thought process. It's actually a thought process that probably every single creator, maybe even you watching this video, are thinking right now. So hopefully if I share my story, it'll give you some insight into how I was able to overcome that and how you can hopefully do it for yourself as well. So I went to film school, and pretty much directly after film school, I was offered an opportunity to work on Hawaii Five-0. So I was guaranteed 2 days at $150 a day, but that was enough for me to have the faith to buy the one-way ticket, even though I'd never been there in my life, didn't really know anyone out there except for one of my friends who had gotten there a few days earlier, and basically just sent it. So I only had about $2,000 in my bank account, and I spent half of it immediately on a scooter because I didn't have enough money to afford a car. So I was driving all over the island on this scooter, including the highways, which probably wasn't legal, also definitely not safe, but that's what I had to do. So when I first got there, my one friend who had gotten there a few days earlier was actually sleeping on the floor at a church, and I just asked him, hey, would they mind if I stay there with you as well for a little bit? And fortunately, the church allowed both of us to be there at the same time. So we were actually there sleeping on the floor of the church for about a month before we actually got a real apartment. And once we did, we actually had a few other friends from film school move in. So there's a total of 6 of us in a 3-bedroom apartment. So for those of you who don't know about Hawaii rent, it's extremely expensive. And like I said, I have barely any money. So I was bunking with another dude, and then eventually his girlfriend moved into the same room. So there's 3 of us in this like 15-foot by 15 room. So as you can imagine, there was not a whole lot of personal space. So at that time, like I didn't have very much money, so I had to take any gig I could get. So I was day playing on different productions. I was on a reality TV show, working behind the scenes for a little bit, and just like random weddings, just basically anything I could possibly get. And it was around that time that people like Sam Colder, Taylor Cut Films, Matt Como, all these guys were coming out. They were kind of the travel influencers, right? And I saw these guys and I was like, it looks like they're freelancing, working for awesome companies, traveling the world. I want to do that. So I thought that being the influencer was cool, right? So I tried to go after that. And of course, this is when Gary Vee was starting to come out and he was pushing hustle culture and grind and all this kind of stuff. So I was literally waking up almost every single day for sunrise to shoot, as well as sunset to shoot. And if I wasn't going with somebody else, I was going by myself. And then after the sunset shoot, I would come home, I would edit everything. And sometimes I'd be up till like 10 or even midnight editing pictures so that I could post it the next day, because of course you have to be consistent, right? So when you looked at my Instagram at the time, and I grew it actually fairly quickly, it looked like I was living the life, which a lot of it was super fun, going on hikes, going to the beach, all this kind of stuff. But in reality, it started to become more of a job and more of an obligation that I had to shoot because I had to continue feeding the beast, right? And as a result, I started to lose passion for it because I felt like I had to create, because that was how I was getting my validation. And by the way, I wasn't making any money off of posting any of this stuff. So it started to become super exhausting because I constantly had to be creating new content, constantly had to be posting and showing up online and posting stories and, collaborating with other people or engaging or whatever it might be so I could grow the following to eventually hit the pipe dream of making money on Instagram. And I began to put my personal value and even the value of my work in the amount of engagement I would get on a post. So this was in the heyday of Instagram where, you could post a photo and it would get 4,000 likes, and that wasn't unreasonable. So, some of my posts would do that, and then some of them would get like 1,500, which for me at the time was not a lot compared to 4,000. So I would look at that and I'm like, did this photo suck? And then I would like analyze it and try to figure out why it didn't work well and be like, okay, well, I'm only going to shoot this kind of stuff because that's what performs well. That's what the people like. And I started basing all my value in my work in terms of how people responded to it. And, looking back, obviously, I know that algorithms work weirdly. So maybe I just posted a weird time or whatever, right? Doesn't mean if content is good or bad, but at the time, that's what I thought. And then on top of that, I wasn't making any money at anything. So all of my validation was based on how well it performed on the Instagram algorithm. So I decided, okay, well, I need to figure out how to make money at this. And I had no idea what I was doing. So I Google searched real quick. I found some ebook for like $37. I had a script of what to send to reach out to brands. I had no idea what to do. So I basically just copied and pasted that and sent it to a bunch of brands. I remember, I think I reached out to 127 brands and I got either no response, ghosted, or just were not interested from every single one of them. And honestly, rightfully so, because I was just copy and pasting a pitch that probably 1,000 other people also sent. It was a terrible pitch, to be honest. And I got super discouraged because it reinforced this idea that maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not actually talented enough to succeed, because if I'm reaching out to brands and no one's responding to me, or they're saying they're not interested, then how could I possibly expect to compete with anybody else? Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm not good enough. And then on top of that, when your engagement was like this and I put all my value into the engagement, I just thought that I was not cut out and I was a failure. And basically it all came to a culmination at a breaking point. And it gets to this point where I was so in my own head because I was like, I have 40,000 followers. Why does no one want to work with me? But they still didn't. So I didn't think I was cut out to succeed. And it came to a breaking point when a few months later, after still consistently posting, after still getting denied, still not really getting any jobs, that I had an opportunity to go do a trip to the Virgin Islands where it was a free trip. They were going to, put me up in a hotel, but I had to shoot for the company and I had to pay out of my own pocket to fly to the Virgin Islands. So at this point, just to give you context, all my roommates, except for the one original one that I was at the church with, had left. So it was just me and him. And I had $500 in my bank account. We didn't have any incoming roommates. Our rent was going to be close to $3,000, which obviously I had no way to even come close to paying that. So I didn't know if I was going to go on this trip, if I would be able to afford rent, or if I would go on this trip and I would come back and I would be homeless. Like, genuinely, that was a concern that I had. So in order to kind of like prepare for it, we actually went and put down deposits on another location, on another apartment that was cheaper, because again, I didn't know if we were going to come back and be homeless. So I remember this super vividly. This is one of the first times in my life that I just felt helpless, that I felt like I was not in control of anything, because I wasn't. And I just got on my knees. I was sobbing and I was like, God, I do not know what to do. And if I'm going to get out of this, I need a miracle, because I don't know if I'm going to be homeless when I come home. I don't know if I'm even going to have enough money to pay for rent, or if we're going to have a roommate, or if I'm going to have to like move home to my parents' house. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I need a miracle. And I was sobbing. I was praying. I was on my knees. That was the first time I ever prayed on my knees. And the next day I had to fly out to the Virgin Islands. Again, it was a free project. I wasn't getting paid for it. So I fly out the next day. And then I think it was either that night or the day after, I get a call from my roommate and he's like, dude, we actually just got somebody to accept to be a roommate with us. So now we have a third roommate. And at that point, I don't know if he realized it, but I had such a relief come over me. And that was one of the first times I tangibly felt God's hand in my life, because there was no way. Like, we had no open leads. We had no people even remotely interested in being our roommate. And I leave, and then all of a sudden this person wants to be our roommate. I was like, are you kidding me? So fast forward a few months from then, I'm starting to get a little bit on my feet. I'm charging, $500 here, $1,000 there, mostly pretty low budget gigs and pretty much anything I can get. I even started doing second shooting for weddings whenever I could, just to kind of fill in the gaps. But in general, I was literally just barely scraping by. Like, my rent was more expensive because there's only 3 of us now, and Hawaii just in general is expensive. So I was kind of just making enough to survive. But throughout this entire process, I was still posting every single day on Instagram. So again, people were looking at this from the outside and like, oh, that dude's balling. He's going on hikes every day. He's going to the beach every day. Looks like he's having a blast. In reality, I was like, I don't know if I can pay my rent this month. So one day, I think I was editing or something like that. I hear a chime on the phone that I got a DM. So I just look at it real quick and it's from Royal Caribbean. I'm like, Royal Caribbean? What the heck? And I open it up and they're actually asking me if I'm free at any point to chat. And I was like, yes, I'm free in like 15 minutes. So I send them my number. I say, hey, let's connect, all this stuff. Like, I was like, this might be my big break. This is my opportunity to finally do what I actually want to do. So I get on a call with them and they basically say, hey, they're doing a 3-night cruise to Bahamas for Perfect Day at Coco Cay, and they want me to shoot the experience there, and asked me if I'd be interested. Not only would I be interested in going, but they were actually going to pay me. So I heard that, and honestly, I have no idea what even happened after I heard that they were willing to pay me, but I was ecstatic. Like, I was so zoned out. I was like, somebody, not just somebody, but a big travel company is wanting to pay me to go on a trip and shoot for them. Like, that was a dream come true. And I was so stoked. So we go on this trip, we have an amazing time, we shoot great footage, and now I kind of feel like I'm on top of the world, right? Like, cause this job kind of legitimized me. Now I can start reaching out to bigger companies, hotels, tourism boards, all this kind of stuff. And now instead of just putting my validation in terms of the likes and the engagement, now I'm putting my validation in, oh, I worked with Royal Caribbean, or I worked with this big company. So I have these plans to start reaching out to the hotels and to the tourism boards and like all these different plans. But then the most stressful 2 months of my life happened directly after that job. So I had the opportunity to go shoot another international project. It was not as big as the Royal Caribbean one, but I was still getting paid a few $1,000. I was super stoked about it. But right before that, my sister actually came in to visit in Hawaii, and we just went out for the day, went on a hike. I think we were gone for about 20 minutes, and I was super stupid, and I left my camera bag in the back seat of my car. So we go on this hike for about 20 minutes. We come back, and I see glass shattered all over the street. And I look up, and I see my window is busted, and I look in the window, and my camera bag is gone. Drone, I think it was 2 lenses, my only camera body, like basically all my accessories were gone. So all in all, I think it was about $10,000 worth of gear that was stolen, and obviously that sucked. But what sucked even more to me is that I felt like my dream was stolen. And I was devastated, not only just because of the $10,000, but because I had spent the last 2 years of my career saving and investing and trying to get any like lens or camera or whatever upgrade I could so I could finally have the kit that I would be able to actually realistically shoot these professional projects. And I had invested pretty much all of my business savings into this gear, and I felt like as soon as they stole it, they had ripped my dreams from underneath me. They had stolen my dreams, and now I didn't know what to do. And on top of that, I had a job coming up where I needed to have the gear to shoot, but I didn't have the money to be able to afford $10,000 to invest into new gear because I'd called insurance, they didn't cover it, and like it was a whole mess. So anyways, I'm left with this situation where I need to get gear, but I don't have the money for the gear. So I had to take all the money I had just made from that Royal Caribbean job, which wasn't even enough to cover all the $10,000 worth of gear. And then I had to take out another credit card to put the rest of the purchases on it, which was another few $1,000s, which could have turned out really, really terrible because I didn't have any of the money to afford to pay for that. I had no idea. I didn't have really any upcoming jobs besides this one job I had that was international that was going to pay me. So I didn't know where the money was going to come from. So I ended up buying all the gear that I needed, basically just replacing it. And by the grace of God, a few days later, I got an email from a brand that wanted me to do a project for them. And it ended up being that they would pay me pretty close to the exact amount that I needed to pay off the credit card before it, started charging insane interest. And when I saw that email come through, it was just a huge weight that lifted off my shoulders because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna make it. So since then, I've worked with companies like Four Seasons, Marriott, Westin, Expedia, and a whole bunch of other travel related companies. And I've basically gone from charging $100 for a commercial that I didn't even get paid for because I didn't know how to do contracts to charging over $40,000 for raw footage that aired in a national TV commercial. And it's through this entire process that I realized that I can't get my validation from the gear that I own or the companies that I work with or don't work with or how much engagement my posts get or not. Because, early on in my career, I was putting all my validation into that. So whenever one would go down, I would tank and I would think it would be on me and I was doing something wrong. And what I've realized is my validation can only come from the one who created me. And he has created me to do what I'm doing right now. And if he wants me to do that, I can't deny it. So I look back on these obstacles that I faced, and there's plenty more that I didn't even discuss. Like I lost a camera underwater. I've lost 6 drones on shoots, like just a mess, right? But I wouldn't be the person I am today without the resistance that I've faced. I mean, the 6 years ago Nash that just moved to Hawaii could not be doing the stuff that I'm doing right now today because I hadn't been seasoned, right? I hadn't lost everything and had to start completely from scratch. I hadn't gotten denied every single day and still decided to show up even though I wasn't making a dime and there was plenty of other better opportunities that were being presented. I mean, if I had a message for myself 6 years ago or even for you if you're first starting or if you're feeling discouraged like you want to give up on your dream, it's this. It's that you have time. I mean, success isn't a race. Like you can't compare your timeline to someone else's timeline in terms of their calendar or their timeline in terms of their social media page, right? I mean, everybody who succeeds in this industry or just in general goes through a time of testing. And some people are just better at editing it than others. And to be honest, myself, I was pretty good at editing out the testing phase. So all everybody saw was like the highlights, right? And I think that was a huge disservice to everyone who followed me or looked up to me. And if you're one of those people, I'm sorry that I didn't show everything. And maybe you even had a wrong expectation going into things. So maybe you tried to be a creator, you tried to work with brands or whatever it might be, and you failed at first and you looked at me as if I'm special or if, I can't do it, but Nash can because he's got this many followers or whatever, right? To be honest, the entire reason I'm making this video is for the one person that I hope that watches this that is maybe thinking of giving up on their dream, that it's too hard, that it's not worth it, right? Maybe you're reaching out to these brands, you're getting denied, maybe it's just free collabs, maybe they're not interested, and you're like, wow, maybe all they think of me is that I'm a no-name, that I'm a wannabe, that I'm not worth it. And guess what? They very well might think that, because those 100 brands that denied me at first probably thought that about me. But guess what? I found out that I personally can't attribute my success or my failure to what somebody else thinks about me. And by the way, a lot of this is just hypothetical. I realized that I personally have a choice to let them continue thinking what they're thinking, to let that stop me from reaching out, to let that stop me from pursuing my dreams, or I have the choice to give them a reason to not deny me. Choice is yours.